to your point, that wasn't always the case.
Right.
We had people that roamed the earth and never thought that they owned a darn thing.
They might have had a point.
Right. And now we have people living on the same earth, and they feel entitled to everything.
Everything. Welcome to the ENSO podcast. This is a podcast for people engaging in the never-ending process of expansion and growth. The purpose of this podcast is to expand and grow through awareness, introspection, and stillness. We fundamentally understand that relative to all there is to know, we know relatively nothing. With this in mind, we will consider and reconsider interesting perspectives, ideologies, and strategies for the purpose of self-actualization. Josiah, welcome. What are we talking about today?
So we're talking about stewardship versus ownership.
Stewardship versus ownership. Who picked this topic?
We did.
We did.
We have our stuff together.
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody tells us what to do. Well, actually, that's not true at all.
Yeah. No, you did. You picked this topic. You asked me if it was okay. So.
But you seconded it.
I did.
Is it seconded or seconded in the past tense?
I don't know. I'm not really a specialist in parliamentary procedure.
Right. Well, this is pretty important, so we should probably dive into it before we. No. Okay, we'll get on with the podcast. Excellent. So let's start by defining the concepts here. What is stewardship and what is ownership?
Yeah. So I always like to give an accepted definition. So stewardship, the job of supervising or taking care of something, such as an organization or property. It often implies responsible management and care of resources. That's stewardship.
Responsible management and care of resources. Okay.
Yes. Ownership, the act, state, or right of possessing something. It refers to having legal rights and control over property, whether tangible or intangible.
That's it.
That's it. That's a lot.
Wow.
Ownership, yeah.
It's wild how much time we spend, just as a society bickering about ownership when the definition is so loosely held.
It is so loosely owned. Very poor stewardship of ownership.
Literally.
Yeah.
The stewards of ownership need to get their stuff together.
There needs to be a reckoning for sure.
Agreed. Okay, so before we really dive into the perspective on stewardship and ownership, I want to give a little background as to why this was an idea that came to mind. And I think that it boils down to Fight Club.
Okay.
The movie Fight Club.
I knew there had to be some sort of rationale behind this.
Yeah, definitely.
I'd love to hear it.
So you've seen Fight Club, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So a core theme in that movie is that the things we own end up owning us. And this is this paradox of ownership, right? That we spend most of our lives, clawing our way to the top of a pile of possessions that end up becoming our prison. So from a macro perspective, that's kind of terrifying. To me, at least. I don't really want to live that life. That doesn't sound like a pleasant existence. However, there's an alternative, at least in my mind, and I definitely want to break this down further, but stewardship, which to me is more about the leveraging, the enjoyment, and the enhancement of things instead of gaining a sense of identity or worth from those things. So in stewardship, to me, it feels like the things are serving us and we are serving the things in a symbiotic relationship. Whereas with ownership, it seems to me as though it's subservient in nature. However you look at the micro level, we own our possessions and they're ours. And no one can take them from us. Mine. Feels very childish to me. And then at the macro level, if we're to, engage with this Fight Club idea, then at the macro level, we are subservient to these things. They have flipped the paradigm on its head and made us their possessions. So anyways, that's just a little bit of background. I'm curious, did any of that resonate with you? Are you having thoughts? I can see those wheels turning over there.
It did resonate. And I guess the question is, for macro and micro, how, right? How does that happen?
How
is the paradigm flip for macro, right?
Yeah.
Because it seems as if we definitely notice the flip or shift, but rarely do we notice it before or even while it's happening.
Right.
When we can actually do something about it. We typically notice it when it's pretty much too late.
Right. Not that it's ever truly too late, but a lot longer road, right, to go down to flip that paradigm back to maybe where we'd like for it to be. But how do we make that realization?
Well, I think for me at least, when I look at it, we have to reframe what we're trading. What is the trade-off? What is the currency, right? Because I think when we think about ownership, possessions, the right to own something, or the state of owning something, we think about how much it cost to either acquire or maintain.
So true.
And then we think about, how much we're able to get in return for the acquisition and the maintenance and the improvement of that particular thing. And I think if we're in that mindset, or if that's our frame of reference, then we don't realize it until it's too late, right? That the paradigm has shifted, and now the acquisition was really me.
Right, you've been acquired.
By this thing, right.
Yeah.
I've been acquired, and I have not been maintained to some degree.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
This reminds me of years and years ago, one of my first times hearing you speak publicly, you talked about, so you're mentoring business leaders, right? And you talked about how people get into entrepreneurship, into ownership, especially of a small business, because they don't want a job anymore, right? They want a business. They want something, an income-producing asset, so that they can focus their time, energy, and attention on whatever it is that is valuable to them, whatever their preferred currency is. But the paradox that you were speaking about was that many business leaders, they get exactly what they were trying to escape. They get a job, and they're beholden to that job. And there's so many things tied up in it: their reputation, their livelihood, right? Their identity. Yeah, big time. Their family, their friends, get tied up in it. If oftentimes we end up employing the people that we know, like, and trust. Those are oftentimes our family and our friends.
Who are always qualified.
Yeah, they're always qualified. No matter if they're not qualified, we just change the job slightly, right? And think that that'll work out. But anyways, I can't help but think about how this stewardship versus ownership concept is so relevant in the business sphere. And if you talk to any entrepreneur about ownership, they're likely going to start thinking about assets, right? And what those assets are delivering to them, not how they are subtly enslaving them, making them subservient to the possessions.
As if the human being was the asset all along.
Right.
As if the inherent characteristics or attributes of that human being were the asset all along. And that's why I say you don't realize that if we're framing it in an ownership mindset until it's too late, until you have been devalued as an asset by these possessions that you're now enslaved to. But if one can frame it as, I am the asset, and the inherent attributes and characteristics of me as a human being are the asset, then we're much more likely to, in my opinion, not own as much, and therefore not devalue ourselves over time.
Ooh. You are the asset, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
It's you.
You. So, and every time that I think we acquire something, there is a cost associated with it, but it's not money. But, this microphone right here, right? The studio acquired this microphone maybe a year ago. Paid, I don't know, $20 for it.
Looks like a pretty nice microphone to me.
$25.
Perfect. Okay. No argument here.
But my point is, they paid a price.
Yeah.
Right. And then they're paying people to maintain it over time. And at some point, let's say that they want to liquidate their assets, right, for some reason. Then this microphone can be sold to a new owner, right? Tracking?
Yeah, absolutely.
And hopefully it's sold at a much higher price than what it was acquired. But that depends on the maintenance as well.
Right.
But there's a variable there that is that aligns with the degree of maintenance, the care that it takes to maintain an asset, and then the price that is paid for that asset, and that is time.
Right.
Right. So someone had to earn the money. A company had to earn the money. An entrepreneur, like you said, people that want to go from having a job to working for themselves, they often bootstrap, things. So they literally take the money that they earned from their career, years, decades sometimes, and they try to translate that into a product or a service or a business or an asset, right?
Yeah.
And, so they're really paying with all that time that they've banked.
Yeah.
That is now currency.
Right.
But 5 years later, all that time that they've banked and turned into, $25 or $25,000, it is worth a lot less over time.
The time is worth less over time.
Yes.
Counterintuitive.
The translation of that time into currency is worth less over time.
So I think that this begs the question, what's the pattern interrupt? How do we break this cycle? The two things that come to mind for me, and I'm sharing because I'd really love to hear your feedback on them, are presence, number one. Just being present is a good way to stop that process from occurring without our awareness, because presence centered on awareness, at least in my mind. And then the second would be reflection, or maybe introspection would be a better term for it. I'm not sure what the technical difference is, but those are the two ways that come to mind for me. Now, how to break the cycle into this, it's basically a conversion, right? You're exchanging one currency for another currency in this metaphor. So how do we create an intentional exchange where maybe if we're converting our time into a more shelf-stable and value-stable form of time? This is getting pretty dense, but how do we do that?
Well, I think it shelf-stable, yeah. translatable, in my opinion, is kind of where the term or concept that we need to be thinking about, right? So you're always translating or transforming your time into something that has a utility. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, okay, right. Yeah. So you go to work, you get paid, you're just translating that time into money.
Right.
Then you take that money and you translate that into something else, right? Or transform it into a possession.
Right.
Right. Or
food,
rent, whatever.
Yeah.
Right. So I think when we're talking about the concept of presence, trying to understand, slowing down and understanding, okay, what utility am I getting out of my time?
Yeah.
Looking at the different steps or phases. So phase 1, I'm going to work and I'm getting paid by the hour, or if it's salary, right, I'm breaking it down by the hour.
Right.
I'm getting this amount of stuff or this amount of money. What have I done in terms of possessions, or what do I own, or what have I traded that money for? Right. So that's an inventory.
Yeah.
And then how does that align with my values, right? Or does it align with my values?
Right.
Because it might not, right?
Yeah.
It may be someone else's values. It may be your environment's values. And then what I've always kind of gone back to this term, but context, right? So how much of my context is driving that? Did I grow up poor? Therefore, now that I've made it and I'm making, a 7-figure salary, do I still have poor habits? Do I still operate out of that poor context?
Right.
Am I still approaching it in scarcity? Right, where now I've got 3 of everything.
Right.
And I go from it being 3 of everything that comes from, a thrift store to 3 of everything that comes from the golf pro shop.
Right.
It doesn't matter because I've translated my time in the same manner.
Yeah.
Right.
But those actions are gonna they have consequences, right?
That's the next phase, right? So
Yeah.
after I have made an assessment of how I've translated my time into money, and then how that money is now translated into some form of utility, and I'm trying to understand how it relates to my context, right? Then you've got to get to the next phase, which is, okay, what am I actually doing here? And is it even something that is moving me closer to my goals?
Right.
Right. What is my goal?
I was about to say, yeah.
For how I use my time.
If we've paused, if we've become present enough to form goals that are meaningful to us, not goals that have been maybe imposed upon us.
Right.
This also makes me think of quality of life. Right. So, for reference, what's an example of an event that you would pay good money to attend? I know you follow soccer, you follow college football.
An event that I would, hands down, an F1 race, Monaco, or Singapore.
Oh, Singapore.
Singapore,
wow.
Probably.
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun.
I would.
Okay.
To me, that would be a very positive translation of my time and resources.
Yeah. Okay. So let's flip this on its head. What's your least favorite thing that you have to spend your time doing sometimes?
Most things that I've done already. So, outside of recording podcast sessions.
Come on, you don't hate this. You don't hate it. Come on.
I know. I'm saying I don't mind doing that.
Right.
Yeah. Again, but I would say, things that replacing, things that I own, but I can clearly understand and articulate the utility of that thing, and I know, okay, I'm spending or investing the money that I have acquired by trading my time and I'm going to get this particular thing, and I need it to last for XYZ amount of years for that investment to make sense.
Right.
And when it doesn't, and I have to then replace it with something that is the same degree or better, in spite of my maintenance of that thing, right? So in spite of spending the time to maintain it, which I have no problem doing that. But when I have to replace it or do it again, that is annoying.
That was a very detailed example. I appreciate that. Okay, so for this situation, this reference situation here, your time spent at Singapore F1 race, your time spent shopping for this item that you have to replace for no good reason other than poor build quality. Yep. It's both a few hours of your time, right? But the value, the quality of that time is drastically different. So if you could buy 3 hours of F1 time with your 3 hours of shopping time, like, you would make that deal, right?
I would.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know why?
Why?
Well, I mean, one is an experience, and the other one is a possession.
True.
Right.
True.
And we're much more. I mean, there's a lot of research out there to prove this up, but as human beings, we are much more grateful for experiences than we are possessions, and that's because of how we're. Very brief explanation here on something that there's been an extensive amount of research on. We are hardwired to habituate, or when it comes to hedonism, we're hardwired for the stimulus not to have as much impact. So possessions, every time we get a possession, it doesn't have as much impact over time. Therefore, the gratitude wanes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so whenever we have an experience, though, because that experience is something that happens within a finite period of time, and we can no longer be in that experience except for to reference it or remember it, it holds a lot more weight. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. No, and it's beautiful. You just like short-circuited my whole example, which I'm grateful for because I was kind of rambling. But, it's you tapped into quality of life. What is going to create progress for you towards your – and this is an assumption that I'm making, but that you have the goal of having a higher quality life.
Right. And for me, when I look at having a higher quality of life, it's not about my possessions because – I truly only want to possess things that have very nuanced or specific utility, right? So to varying degrees, not saying that, I'm looking at all shelters the same, because I'm not looking at all cars the same, but have learned and am learning that when it comes to possessions or ownership, more is less.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
When did that become
And I say that way on purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, more is less, meaning the more of that I have of it, the less I really appreciate it.
It's interesting that you say that because I've been thinking lately about how in times of plenty, we have this tendency to be wasteful, and it can even come down to the amount of mayonnaise left in the jar when I'm trying to make a sauce for dinner.
Is it Duke's?
And Hellman's.
Oh, okay.
So I love the reaction from our live studio audience today. This is fantastic. So my point being, if we only have a little bit left, then I'm going to be resourceful and I'm going to find ways to make it work. And oftentimes the finished product turns out even better when I had that constraint. Whereas if we accidentally bought 2 jars of mayo at the store, we didn't realize we already had one, we bought another, then I might overdo it. And I think that this happens beneath the level of consciousness. I have also observed this with toothpaste, right? but I think it's far-reaching, and this less is more and more is less becomes very relevant in this context, where just by the act of having more, we become inherently more wasteful. And I'm using wasteful in a sense of like, it is a pole, and the other pole on this continuum is resourcefulness. We have wastefulness and resourcefulness. Resourcefulness just being the maximization of whatever resource is available. Do you find this in your life?
No, so I do, and I think we're gravitating more towards that term of stewardship, right? Because to me, there is a word that really helps us find the bridge. So you said if we have 2 jars of Hellmann's or Duke's.
So you're a Duke's fan then?
Well,
you're repping pretty hard for them, right?
They have really good marketing.
Ooh.
But I'm more of a veganese guy.
Right, right.
But
I forgot. I was like,
follow
why
your
are
heart.
we talking about
Follow
mayo?
your heart. It's pretty good. Good
okay,
brand.
good
Yeah.
stuff.
But I've never been more interested in mayonnaise before Duke's. So that's what I'm saying. But
look out, vegans.
But the key word is need. So assessment of what you actually need. And I don't think that can occur until you've actually assessed your context.
Right.
The first period in your life where you had to reconcile with what you needed and what you had. And then that created a context in your mind that says, this is the threshold.
Right.
This is the limit. I have to have this or I'm just not alive, right?
Right, or I'm suffering
in
some way.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think if you're able to assess, like, wait. What am I trying to accomplish? And what do I actually need to accomplish this? And then can I go and get that thing, acquire it, only what I need? Or if I have that resource available, how do I make sure that I am a good steward of it relative to my goal and need?
Right.
Right.
No, it makes me think. I have this theory that I find myself sharing a lot about the chain of events, with the end stage being the outcome, which the outcome is what we tend to focus on a lot. But I think that it could potentially start with values, and those values over time create desires, right? And a desire closely held and enduring over time creates a need, a perceived need. I think our actual needs are so minimal in life, like the actual needs of a human being are so simple, and often so easily met, right, without all of the perceived junk, that I'm not even really referring to those right now.
Right.
Shout out Maslow. We're going like actually what's happening right now. So values create desires create needs, needs create actions, and actions create outcomes. This is my theory.
I agree. I think I have a really good example.
Please.
So if you'll look to your right, and like audience, he's looking to his right there outside the window, beyond our reflection, there is
who is that handsome man?
There's a drink machine, right? A vending machine, and it is filled with so many options, right?
Wow.
Now that's the outcome for the vendor. They have somehow assessed that people will need any of those things, so much so that they're willing to pay for it.
And pay for it at a premium.
Right. They're willing to own it. They believe they have the right to own it. They're willing to be in the state of ownership of it. and even if that is temporary, and they believe they need it.
They believe they need it.
And how did we get to that point where someone will go berserk, just be bellicose in some degree if they don't get their one of 4 sun-kissed options in that machine?
Right.
Right?
Or they go to the grocery store and they're out of Duke's
They're out of
mayonnaise.
Duke's.
What the heck?
They're out of Duke's on shelves 1 through 3 that all have Duke's on them.
It's a nightmare.
Right?
Yeah.
How did we get there where that is the perceived need? To your point, that wasn't always the case.
Right.
We had people that roamed the earth and never thought that they owned a darn thing.
They might have had a point.
Right. And now we have people living on the same earth, and they feel entitled to everything.
Everything. Wow. Profound. Resonates with me on a deep level. I think we have spent a lot of time talking about stewardship and touting the benefits of stewardship. And I think that I don't want ownership to feel like the unloved stepchild here. So I think we should give some attention. What are some of the problems that ownership solves? Just in a society, in an advanced economy like the one that we have today.
Yeah. Well, I think what ownership does to some degree is I think the overall intention was an aggregation of resources by an entity or multiple entities that could disseminate or ration or be a responsible steward of those resources. I think that's kind of like the overall intention of ownership.
Right.
But, divine right comes in, and then you got all these other things where people keep redefining what it is to be a steward or the chief steward of resources.
Yeah.
And then, there's the entitlement to those resources, and then how they're allocated or used.
This is probably just a unique idiosyncrasy on my portion, but do you ever hear people say the words "I deserve" and just kind of brace for impact?
Yeah, all the time, and it is very interesting to me. Or I've actually, in some ways, I mistake sometimes, and I have to correct myself when people say I need something.
Ooh.
I have to really translate it into, they're saying they deserve it. There's an entitlement. They don't really need it. Because I used to ask people all the time, like, wait, do you really need that?
I've seen you do that.
Yeah. And, I was taking it so literally, like, wait, this person really feel they need this?
So the autocorrect that happens in my brain is they've wanted this for some time. And this ties back to my answer for that question that I asked you earlier. They're afraid of not having it.
Yeah.
I think that the go-to-market strategy of ownership is we help people feel safe. We help them reduce ambiguity and uncertainty in this inherently ambiguous and uncertain existence.
I agree. And the thing that the device, the tool that is deployed,
Capitalism.
Scarcity. That
same thing.
I think what yeah, same.
This is a joke. We joke around a lot on this podcast.
The reason I say that is because I don't think as individuals who have the ability in our society to work and acquire capital in some way to then go and acquire ownership of some asset. I don't think we, on an individual basis, truly assess the abundance of that resource or the abundance of the thing we are trying to acquire.
What does that mean?
How
do we do that? I'm sorry.
Well, I just don't think we actually do the tabulation.
Right.
And so therefore scarcity is used against us. We don't really know that it's limited. We don't even know how many of that limited edition, whatever it is that we want. We don't know how many are in stock. We have no idea. And so because we have no idea, because we haven't actually done that due diligence, the principle of scarcity is then deployed, and it works on us every time.
I think you just cracked the code, honestly. Our listeners are wiser now. They know. They will not fall victim.
Well, I don't know.
It's a joke.
Yeah. But it is very interesting to me because, like, for someone to believe they need something, even me, I have to question when I feel I need something, because that, to your point, either I have always had it and I have never gone without it, so I'm afraid of not having it, therefore I think I need it, or I really desire it and I haven't had it yet, right? But in either case, a lot of that need comes from our environment conditioning us. And I don't think it's some cabal or pernicious, there's not someone, right. I don't think there's someone just like behind it or something, but I just think it's kind of our wiring and how we're set up, where it's just very easy for us to be susceptible to scarcity. And I think it does take us doing the proper assessment of whatever it is that we think we desire or we believe we need, to actually see, wait, is this something I have to have right now? Is this something that is really limited and I'll never get at a later date? And then, what are the costs relative to me acquiring it right now?
Actual costs.
Yeah.
I think, though we're attempting to love on ownership here, it's becoming more and more apparent to me. It seems like a very pervasive illusion. Well-intended, right? It's supposed to reduce fear. It's supposed to reduce uncertainty. It's supposed to give us the space to feel all warm and fuzzy inside, But it also begs the question, arguably, right? This is up for debate. We were talking about, how do you tabulate the value of something? I don't know. It's a case-by-case basis. Different things have different values to different people. However, I think you could make a compelling case that some of the most valuable resources, you can't really own them.
You can't.
And I'm thinking you're going to laugh at me. I'm thinking love right now.
Yeah.
You cannot own love. People have tried for millennia to own love. It does not work.
It doesn't work.
It can't be taken. It has to be freely given.
Right.
Therefore, it can't be owned.
You have to. It's very interesting when you hear of or see people in relationships and they frame it as, I need this person.
Oh boy.
And how they behave, right?
When they think that way.
Yeah, when they think that way. As opposed to I actually want to be with this person and I'm trying to, accomplish this with this person.
But that's how it starts, though, isn't it? I'm just saying, let's
it could be
love story it out here,
yeah.
Right? Well, I have a very relevant example. The genius, the brilliance of Josiah Ball, right? It's my buddy. It's my guy. Let's explore a podcast together. How much fun could that be?
Right.
Maybe some of these ideas are worth sharing. Now we have a podcast. It's awesome. We have a lot of fun in here.
We do.
And the paradigm could easily shift to my fearfulness that something might change and the podcast might end.
Yeah.
Because that's a possibility, right? I mean, we have no idea where our lives are going to take us. And we're both very intentional people about charting the course of our own life and existence. But it's just not within our control. So from that perspective, that's my one case study for how oftentimes it starts.
So I would say I agree. It is a possibility. It is also a certainty.
It is.
That it will end.
Yeah.
And that's why I say it can start out as I need this person. But that is someone who hasn't really come to grips or hasn't really understood that you are beginning something while it is ending.
Literally.
You are beginning this beautiful relationship, marriage, whatever it is, right? While it is ending. And I think if you can come to terms with that, and if you can learn to find the balance and harmony, then you can actually understand the difference between ownership and stewardship. See, I'm stewarding my marriage because I understand and operating under the premise that best case scenario, the woman I'm married to is going to die. Yeah. And therefore, if I go into it with that mindset, I am being a good steward of the most important resource that we have together, which is our time.
Right.
And there have been jobs that I have turned down, right? There have been opportunities to acquire or maintain assets, right? Or positions that didn't necessarily, when I did the calculus, didn't make sense relative to the time,
right?
That resource that I would be giving up. Because I understand that this relationship will end, best case scenario, in death. Now, it can be a death that I accelerate through the termination of the marriage, right? Because I didn't really understand how to apply that resource, which is our time. I applied it elsewhere, right? I said, you know what? I want this. I want to acquire this asset, and therefore, I want this new Corvette. But to do that, I've got to work, an extra 12 hours a week. But that's 12 hours I don't have with her.
Right.
And over a 7-year period of 12 hours a week, that adds up. I miss a lot of dinners, right?
And
walks and and time, whatever it is, right? And what happens is I haven't been the best steward of that relationship.
Right.
And I think I wasn't the best steward because I took that relationship for granted. And the thing that I'm missing in that scenario is that it will end.
Right.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to ignore that fact or avoid it at all costs. I think it makes me giggle a little bit because in our home we call our cat the immortal kitten.
Just not 9 lives, but just,
right.
It's going to be immortal.
We love him. The thought of not having him is so painful that it has been easier for us to masquerade about, claiming that he's immortal. We know that he's not immortal. But perhaps a healthier stance, a healthier frame of reference is we have been so fortunate to be involved in this cat's existence. And for him to come into our lives and fill our hearts with love, make us laugh, make us cry sometimes. He loves destroying shoes. The nicer the shoes, the more he wants to destroy them. But when we know that the relationship is bound to end, we appreciate it.
Right. And I think so. Pets, they do something that a lot of other possessions, right, can't do. If you are fortunate and present and mindful enough to actually observe it, they paint that picture for you, right? They give you that depiction of something ending beyond your time, or excuse me, before your time.
Before your time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but what a lot of people do is, they rush to ownership. They go and they know a pet is on its way out. They go get another pet because they don't want to sit with that reality. Like you said, it's very painful.
Yeah.
But we get pets in a lot of cases because it's very painful to sit with our own mortality, right?
Yeah.
We get possessions and ownership, and I call them micro losses because we can't handle the big loss.
The big loss.
We can't handle, in a lot of ways, not necessarily like our ending, but we don't really understand what non-existence is like.
Right.
And we don't want to do the math around that. And ownership allows us to not do the math around our infinitesimal nature.
I wonder, can we really, when we say loss of life, I don't know that we're really losing anything.
No.
It's more so diving into the unknown, right? We simply don't know. We don't have data. The probes we've sent in, they have not returned.
Right.
So it's just unknown. And what we do know is that humans, we tend to struggle with what we don't know.
We do. We
They're
struggle.
Scary.
And ownership, like I said, I think it distracts us. It's a very healthy distraction. But I think it's tough if we don't actually parse, what we need to own.
Yeah.
Right? And what we need to actually acquire, because we're so busy getting the next new thing to avoid the thing we're really afraid of.
Right. Which is possibly you could make a case for, let's go and face it. What does freedom look like? Maybe it looks like facing the unknown.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Well, I agree. It looks like good stewardship, or stewardship of your time.
Right.
And that is frightening for a lot of people, because, everyone. I think it's frightening for everyone. Not a lot of people, everyone. Because when you get up and you don't have something planned, or you don't have a purpose, then what do you do with your time? How do you even feel valued enough with your time?
Gosh, retirement.
Yeah, exactly.
such a deadly act for so many people, because if much of our worth, much of our identity, much of our purpose is tied up in our profession, and then we ultimately what is retirement but abandoning your profession, your craft. We also abandon a vital source of meaning and purpose, so that can be quite detrimental to living a high quality of life.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a quote about stewardship, and I think now's a great time to share it. What do you think?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. In stewardship, we find the paradox: to hold something truly valuable, we must be willing to let it go. I love this quote so much because I think it highlights everything that we've discussed in this call. It's embracing the unknown. It's diving headfirst into the pool of fear and being excited about what you might find.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, it's the word that comes to mind is relevance. Stewardship helps you understand that you are not that relevant beyond how you actually manage that resource. You are not the creator of that process, simply a steward of it.
Yeah.
And that is your only relevance in some ways, And I think that's a significant relevance. I think that is enough, to really add meaning and value and purpose for our lives or our existence. But that's just me, right?
That's all we've got.
Yeah.
We've got our individual experiences. Okay. Feels like a good bookend for this podcast discussion. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for listening.
The Enzo Podcast is brought to you by Bolton Capital and New Holdings. You can find the Enzo Podcast on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Music. The song Full Bloom by Yule and Noemina. You can find them wherever you listen to your music.